Kurds, based on the number of years that the PKK was actually based in Syria. There's been all kinds of conspiracy theories, or even beyond conspiracy theories, that Syria will then try to move the PKK against Turkey if Turkey tries to meddle too much into Syria. I can't speculate on that. Anything is possible in our part of the world. If Iran can work with Al-Qaeda, then anything can happen. Ideology is less relevant these days, and it's something that we have to be mindful of. And that's why I think I go back to how the Syrian opposition deals with the Kurdish issues in Syria will be important to whether or not the Syrian Kurds get involved or not. And that will probably sideline any positive or negative pressures from any of the other countries. But it's there. It's an issue.
Good. Thank you very much. We'll open it up to questions from the audience. We'll have microphones that come around, so please bear with me. What I'd ask is that when I identify you, please identify yourself and your affiliation. Identify to whom your question is directed, and please ask a question. Maybe Steve Larrabee to begin with.
Steve Larrabee, Rand. I do want to make one comment, though, however, to Henri, that you may be confused, but after listening to you, I'm confused, but at a much higher level of analysis. My question really is about the Kurds in Syria, and to kind of pick up where both of you left off. I had the impression that the Kurds in Syria have been sort of sitting on the fence, waiting to see which direction things were going, that they're divided, but I also have the impression that they now seem to be moving more towards joining the opposition. Is this true? If so, what are the implications of that, and what role do you see, both of you, the Syrian Kurds, playing? And then finally, just as to follow up on what you asked before, is there any hard evidence that Syria or Iran has actually begun to fund again and support the PKK? Thank you.
It's funny because I that the Kurds of Syria have always been the opposition, the only group that has been an opposition to Assad. So it's now that the question is not whether they're an opposition or not; it's whether they're going to join this opposition. I think that any Kurd in Syria would know that Assad is he's not going to reform. There's certainly not going to be. Gave out this olive branch of, okay, well, now we'll make you citizens after how many years? And people pretty much just scoffed at that. I mean, this is going to take serious reforms for any Kurd to take it seriously. The challenge is, and there's a decision for the Syrian Kurds to make, is when will they kind of actively engage in Syrian opposition issues with the other groups. And if you look at the way this state of Syria is, it hasn't really done a major crackdown on the Kurdish areas, is almost scared to launch big attacks in the Kurdish areas for fear of flaming up a community against them. But the decision that they'll have to make soon, I'd say sooner rather than later, is they have to fish or cut bait, because if there is regime change and the Syrian Kurds were not part of the process, then they'll likely not get any of the proceeds. If there is no regime change and Assad somehow miraculously stays in power, which is not impossible, but let's say he does stay in power, and the Syrian Kurds were seen as not supporting Assad, then they're going to be in a very difficult position. It's not an enviable position for the Syrian Kurds to be in. And it's time that they have a leadership that can really make a wise decision. And I think the way to do that is to secure their rights within the discussions with the other opposition groups. And look, we had the same chauvinist challenges when we were part of the Iraqi opposition. We had fights over the word Kurdistan. We had fights over the word federalism. And it wasn't easy. It was a 20-year process of trying to tell people, look, federalism doesn't mean the breakup of Iraq. It's a political system. Kurds aren't evil. We've by and large been able to succeed. And I think the Kurds of Syria can succeed because they're a pretty unified bloc, and they can be pretty organized. And having been underground for so long gives you that ability to organize quickly, to mobilize quickly, and to have your roots within the various communities. And I think that there may be apprehension of getting, by some of the Arab opposition members, of getting the Kurds on board, because we've proven in Iraq that we can be the most effective of the groups in the country. And wouldn't it be interesting if the Kurds of Syria ended up playing the role that the Kurds of Iraq played in Iraq, in Syria? It would be a fascinating development.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there? You noted that senior Syrian figures make up some of the key military commanders in the PKK. Is it fair to say that those Syrians are relatively disconnected from this larger Syrian Kurdish community with respect to internal developments in Syria, or is there a connection?
I think there's a connection. I think we can't rule out a connection, and I think the connection will be strengthened or weakened depending on the role Turkey plays in Syria. If Turkey is seen as kind of stymieing or kind of quelling Kurdish identity issues or Kurdish demands, if it's seen as sidelining the Kurds in their outreach to the opposition, in their conferences and so forth, then again it will give ammunition to the Syrian Kurdish PKK members to go back in through their contacts to their community to say, look, this is going to happen to you, what's happening to us, so pick up arms. It's almost counterintuitive. In this issue, it's probably better if Turkey wants the Kurds of Syria on board, that it has to be more comfortable with the issue of a Kurdish political identity emerging in Syria.
Yeah. Henri, anything you want to add to?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, that there is a significant Kurdish PKK party in Syria, the PYD, which is plays a significant role and has a lot of influence. But I think the way for let me ask the question. Imagine for a moment if there was a Syrian uprising without the presence of the KRG next door. I think the presence of the KRG is very, very significant, because for the first time, even, I'm not saying the KRG is a major world power, but still the Syrian Kurds do have instinctively, or I should say, a natural ally that will look out for them, will protect them. This is the first time yet you see such a thing developing in the region, because the KRG does have influence. So that's one very important development. The second is, if you take what Qubad said a few steps forward, and Syria does end up becoming a federal arrangement with the fall of Assad, say 3, 4, 5 years down, what impact will that have on Turkey? And this is something that the Turks have to worry about, because if you have now two Kurdish federal regions in the region, and if you also look at what Turkish Kurds say, I mean, the Turkish Kurds are talking very, very openly now, more so than ever, about provisional assemblies, provisional autonomy, but not just for themselves, I mean, for all the 6 or 7 different regions of Turkey. So this will essentially kick the nature of the debate to a much higher level, and much higher level of antagonism. So it also, the Turks do need to worry about this phenomena of Kurdish nationalism that is going to get stronger. But Qubad is right. I mean, it's not clear that Assad is going to lose. It's not clear that the opposition is going to, and if the Kurds do not take a clear position immediately. On the issue of Steve's question regarding the PKK and Syria and Iran, look, I think in the PKK there are divisions. There are divisions between the hardliners and those who are more interested. At least that's my guess. I mean, sometimes you talk to people who say, no, there are no divisions. They're all talking of the same talking points. But it does seem to me, at least logically, when I parse out everything that's being said, etc., that there is a division, and the hardliners are led by Cemil Bayik, who happens to be very close to the Iranians. So I do imagine that the Iranians and the Syrians are trying to put a lot of pressure. The PKK is not a very formidable organization. I mean, it's not very strong, so it is susceptible to a lot of pressure. But whether or not they are being armed by the Syrians and the Iranians, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the Syrians are in such trouble now that that's not really a priority for them. I mean, they can't send forces to enough places to quell the violence. So my hunch is that they're not. But there are pressures, political pressures certainly, on the PKK to say things. And Cemil Bayik certainly has said very, but he also, I mean, he's all over the place, I should say, but he has said things against Turkey.
Okay. In the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Can Oğuz. I'm with the Turkish Embassy. Thank you very much for all your comments. There are two things. One is for Qubad Talabani, and the other is for the rest of the panel. The first one is Qubad said that PKK is not mainly an issue of Iraq and, for that matter, KRG. But, President Talabani, and it is a common enemy, and it's declared by a common enemy by Turkey, United States, Iraq, and the KRG. And President Talabani himself called it as a bela for the KRG. So it is not mainly, obviously, Turkey has issues to deal with, has this fight against the PKK, but we cannot win this war alone, because PKK is still located in the northern part of Iraq, which is under the control of KRG, and it is staging their attacks, starting from there. And while we are talking about, for example, the constitutional process, let's not forget that the latest attack took place on the day that the constitutional process started. So on the one hand, we have violence. On the other hand, Turkey is trying to deal with this issue democratically. But if we undermine the fact that, or overlook the fact that there is violence, I mean, I don't think that we would gain much ground, cover much ground. And the other issue is about the Arab Spring. Now, it is the popular term for the last 7 or 8 months. And there are people even making analogies about Arab Spring, whether, start in the United States with the Occupy Wall Street movement. But let's not forget, then, again, the fact that Turkey is fundamentally and radically different than the countries in which Arab Spring started. Turkey is a democratic country. It may have shortcomings in democracy, but then again, we have a parliament. So we are dealing with issues within the democratic system, but we are also under attack of a violent terrorist group. So I just wanted to point out those two issues that attract my attention. I would welcome your comments, and with a question mark.
And maybe a way to pick up on that, Qubad, is to talk about the PKK as a phenomenon in Iraq, in northern Iraq itself. Both the Iraqi Kurdish parties in the Saddam era fought against the PKK at different points. Can you talk a little bit about that past and how, to what extent, if any, that reflects now in how the authorities in Erbil and Suleimania deal with it?
Well, I think beyond the kind of the disappointment of when you look back on, Kurds fighting Kurds. I mean, we've just within Iraqi Kurdistan we have our terrible history of fighting each other. But the PKK may be Kurds from Turkey, but they're still Kurds. So I think there is a psychological block to initiate a policy that would result in Kurds fighting Kurds again, especially when there is no end in sight, because they've tried. KDP has fought the PKK numerous times over the years. In 2000, the PUK fought the PKK. Both sides suffered casualties, and to the surprise of many or not, Iran aided and assisted the PKK in that fight. And It's a for us it summed it just summed it up that this cannot be resolved militarily, and this is when we're just talking about this group that is in Iraqi Kurdistan. We're not talking about those that are sympathetic members, underground or not, that are inside Turkey. And I made a comment in Turkish press a little while ago saying that, rather than focus on 3,000 PKK members in Kurdistan, we should look at ways to deal with the 1 million PKK members inside Turkey. I actually thought I was lowballing that figure. There could be much bigger support within the 20, 30 plus million Kurds inside Turkey for the PKK. Maybe they're not members, they don't pay their membership dues or have a membership card, but the sympathy is there. There's an issue there. And that's why I think that we cannot underestimate the violence. The violence is there. The violence is a hindrance to any political settlement. It'll always be. And the difficult factor is the PKK, the extreme elements of the PKK, will strike Turkey when they see a political process making progress. The nationalist elements inside Turkey will throw a wrench in the works when they see the peace process between the AKP and the Kurds working. And this is when we talk about having to make brave decisions that are going to be unpopular, whether it's the PKK unpopular to its base or whether it's Turkey unpopular to its opposition, that regardless of an attack here or an attack then, regardless of how egregious that attack is, that peace process mustn't stop, mustn't be derailed. The dialogue must continue, and everyone that participates in this dialogue, and it's easy for me to say here in Washington Atlantic Council, but this is what leaders do. Leaders make difficult decisions, and that they have to make a decision that they have to expect this violence to continue every time there is progress on an issue.
Go ahead. I mean, I'm glad Qubad said this because I meant to say it and I forgot. Whenever you have such a peace process, the extremists will always try to sabotage it. All you have to do is look at other cases. Real IRA that emerged, Hamas in '96 that sabotaged. So you will have all, and the question is, do political leaders manage to overcome this? Do events overtake overtake your goals and your policies? And it happens. I mean, we should not be surprised. It will happen, and it will continue to happen.
Okay. Let me take a couple of questions and then some answers. Back in the back. Yeah.
My name is Peter Humphrey. I'm an intelligence analyst. One of the most undeniable currents in recent human history is self-determination. And as such, there's essentially zero chance that Bosnia and Iraq will look the same 50 years from now. And the trigger for that will, of course, be a Sunni-Shia conflagration in Iraq, at which point the Kurds in northern Iraq, like the Kurds in Syria, will say, not our fight, we're out of here. Given that probability, isn't it time for the Kurds to sort of whisper in the ear of Turkey and say, if this thing goes south, we want you to know two things. One, we're not going to ask for a square centimeter of Turkish territory, and two, we're going to join together with Turkish intelligence and crush the PKK on our territory. In exchange for those two promises, you keep Turkish tanks out of Erbil. And any Turkish Kurds who feel strongly about living under Kurdish rule can move to the new Kurdistan. Isn't it time for the Kurds to sort of whisper that into Turkey's ear? Because this could go down very fast. Second of all, for those Kurds that don't move to the new Kurdistan, isn't a Northern Ireland solution possible in Turkey?
Several different issues. Let's take another question and then respond to that. Lady in the back.
Hi, Joanne Cummings, Department of State. Qubad, nice to see you. It's been a while since I saw you in Erbil. The question is really for you. Since members of the Kurdish National Council of Syria have agreed to go to the Friends of Syria meeting in Tunis tomorrow with the SNC and other oppositionists, do you see that as being a positive move, either in terms of the opposition as a whole or also in terms of the Kurdish role within it?
Those two, reimagining the future, and
okay, I'll take the second question first. Yes, no, it is a positive move, and I think hopefully through this framework they can, play a meaningful role within that framework. I think that because if the Kurdish right is protected in Syria, then you can almost guarantee that other people's rights will be kind of protected in Syria. You'll have Christian rights protected in Syria. You'll probably have another counter towards kind of the secular Islamic trends and the push and pull that will likely evolve when, let's hypothetically pretend that Assad's regime falls. So these are, again, like we've in Iraq, we've been able to play this bridge between the Sunnis and the Shiites, between the secularists and the Islamists, and sometimes even between other communities, sometimes between the neighboring countries. The Kurds of Syria can, if inclined, could play that kind of role as well. Regarding whispering things in Turkey's ears, I think first we should whisper these kinds of things in our own ears before we start talking about them with other people. Look, we're not completely blind to what's happening in the world. We are looking at the region that we're living in. We are looking at certain possibilities and contingencies, and what if this happens and what if that happens. We'd be foolish if we didn't do that. But that doesn't mean we have to act on it. But we're looking at, we don't know where Iraq is going. Iraq was stable a year and a half ago, and now there is a major political crisis on its hands, and there's stagnation in the government, and there's fears of a more conflict brewing. And now you've got Syria with and if anyone tells you they know what's going to happen in Syria, take it from me, they have no idea what's going to happen in Syria. It's so fluid. It's so many factors to it. All we can do is sit there, watch, and just be prepared for any eventuality. But we don't need to do anything that would upset our own apple cart. And the success that we've had over the last 5 or 6 years in building up this relative island of stability is front and foremost our priority, to protect that and to build on that. And we don't want to be entering into any ventures that could potentially jeopardize that, because everyone thinks that's what we're planning for anyway. So whether we whisper it in the Turks' ears or not, this has been the conspiracy theory that the ambassador highlighted in his opening remarks, that this was all a preconceived plan to carve up a new Middle East and draw new boundaries and create new countries. And
Northern Ireland solution for the Mountain Turks.
Henri, do you want to add anything?
Look, I think if Iraq were to break up, clearly, or we're going to a civil war, the Iraqi Kurds would move towards independence de facto. They're not going to do it on their own. They're not going to say, "Oh, we're going to become independent." They're going to become independent because the rest of Iraq disappears or falls into. But I also am not sure that the Turkish government is necessarily going to be opposed to that. And the relationship between the KRG and Ankara has gotten strong enough that the Turkish government understands that there is not much that the KRG can do to stop essentially what's going on in Turkey. By that I say, which means I disagree with you in terms of the PKK, because as Qubad earlier said, the issue in Turkey is not the 3,000 PKK guys who are in Kandil Mountain, but it is, it's a 20% of the Turkish population, some of which are strongly in favor of some kind of demands, and that will continue no matter what, even if there was not a single PKK guy in. And so Turkey will move towards a solution. And the important thing to underline here, and this is a role that the KRG has played very positively, and I know that a gentleman by the name of Talabani, not here, and you might know him, the senior, right, has been telling the Turkish Kurds, look, the AKP is your best chance to get a deal. Get a deal now. because you may not get this chance again. The military has been defeated. This government wants to move forward, wants to liberalize. So this is your opportunity. So the KRG has already been playing, or the Iraqi Kurds have already been playing a very positive role in terms of pushing the negotiations along.
If that's what the PKK wants. Let's maybe have one over here, and then we'll take again 2 questions.
İlhan Tunur from Turkish Daily Vatan. Mr. Talabani, quickly, would you be able to tell us what exactly Syrian Kurds right now ask from the Syrian National Council? It is autonomy, it is self-determination, it's federalism. What exactly it is? And you talk about limited options that Turkey plays regarding Syrian Kurds. Last month there was a conference in KRG region. Could you please tell us what is your guidance or KRG guidance to Syrian Kurds right now? As you know, they have been also criticized by other Syrian opposition by watching what's unfolding but not participating enough. On the other hand, PYD also, many say that they play like a shabiha, accusing, attacking on other Syrian Kurds while they are protesting. Is there any truth to that? Would you be able to confirm to us? Thank you.
Let's get one other question. Back in the back. Yeah, please.
My name is Yerevan Said. I am from Kurdistan, Iraq, and I am a Fletcher student. A master's student at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. I have one question for Mr. Talabani, and also one question for Mr. Barkey. My question for Mr. Talabani is why KRG was successful in making an agreement between Prague and Tehran for stopping violence, and KRG, but at the same time KRG was not able to make PKK stop violence against Turkey. And my other questions for Mr. Barkey is Mr. Fidan Akan, the chief of MIT, now the Turkish public prosecutor has demanded him to attend court for talking to the PKK. To what extent do you see the military influence within the judicial system of Turkey nowadays? Thanks.
Kim?
Okay. I think there's probably a range of what the Syrian Kurds are asking for. It's natural. I mean, when we were negotiating in Iraq for what Iraqi Kurds wanted, there was some that said independence, some said federalism, some said autonomy, some said, something of the other. So there isn't, I wouldn't say there's one clear unified position on what the Syrian Kurds want in terms of a set structure. I hear a lot of people talking about autonomy. You can get into the weeds of that. Does that mean autonomy, or does that mean like the federalism that Kurdistan has? Because one could be construed as a power granted to a region in the sense of autonomy, whereas federalism is more of a power that the federal region gives back to the central government. So there's that fun and games of that will begin if and when there is a new regime. But clearly, the current situation is not acceptable. You cannot have people not be classed as citizens. You can't have their languages, illegal. You can't not allow them to form political, civil organizations. It's just in this day and age, these kinds of restrictions are just not acceptable, and that's why you have these springs and these uprisings, and I think the Kurds will seek and ask for their rights, and these are their rights. They're entitled to those rights. They should be asking for them. They should be putting their feet down and not giving in on those basic fundamental rights that other people around the world enjoy without hassle or grief. And I think the advice that we give is what I said in my remarks earlier, is 2 principles. Stick to 2 principles: democracy and Kurdish rights. Because if you get the democratic principles enshrined, then you get a whole host of other rights that will be protected for a whole host of other people. And it will hopefully prevent one group from dominating the process and imposing a vision on Syria that may not be liked by all. I think, Syria is again, multi-ethnic, multi-sectarian country. And a new Syria, for it to work, has to reflect that new diversity. As to a great question by our master student on why the KRG was successful in reaching an agreement between PJAK and Iran and not the PKK and Turkey is, I think the only way I would say it is that Iran's grievance with the PJAK is broad and multifaceted, but this particular case was relevant to PJAK being positioned on a specific hill, a specific location that Iran deemed as a specific threat, and they made a point of that, and the little back and forth, they were able to move from that particular specific location, and suddenly the shelling stopped, but didn't stop the underlying tensions and the bigger issues. This was a tactical move rather than a strategic victory.
Are we military in the course?
No, I don't. I think the military is influenced. The one thing you can say is that there is very little or almost no influence on the court system by the military, unlike, say, 5 years ago. This court, the judiciary, which has now kind of declared semi-war on the government, is also the same judiciary that is prosecuting all these generals and locking up all these generals. So it's not that. It is, in many ways, more murky in a sense that it has to do with both the security services who have turned against the intelligence service because some of them were kicked out from the intelligence service and they've gravitated to the security services. It part has to do with the fact that the prosecutors and the judges have always in Turkey thought themselves to be superior to everybody else, and they think they have a monopoly on the truth. I think it's a little bit their own zeal that has to do with that, and they thought that, and it's also the national that wants to stop this movement towards accommodation with political accommodation with the Kurds.
Good, thank you. Rather than go over time, I think I'll draw it to a close at this point. Thank you all very, very much for your attention and for your very good questions. Many thanks to Dr. Gunul Tol and her staff for helping with all the arrangements for this. I want also to thank Eurasia Center Deputy Assistant Director Anna Borshevska and our own staff for helping with this. And please join me in thanking Qubad Talabani and Henri Barkey.